Welcome everyone to the reading tonight. We're reading the book 5 with our author Barak, and take it away, Barak.
Cool, thanks, Dan. We figured we'll do that so that we can share the excitement of having a whole bunch of people in person. This thing is attracting a bit of a fellowship, which I'm honored by. I think we left our group having just made it back into Lavatown after the disaster at the bridge and the inadvertent murder of a policeman, stormtrooper, and the death and undeath of Solace, which Shireen was upset with me about for a hot minute.
So lucky.
Lucky you didn't clear that up in the next chapter.
I've learned a lesson here. Anything we're going into the next chapter, which is Act 2, Chapter 10, and it's titled A Growing List of Charges, which basically tells you what's happening, right? We started with a murder. Where can we go next with our little group of misfits? But anything that we wish to cover before we jump into the reading, any sort of plot holes that you want to address or questions?
You don't kill any more kids this time, do you?
I'm not going to answer that right now.
You won't commit to doing it, I'm out of here.
Okay, now I have a dilemma.
We'll stay.
Who do I satisfy?
Yourself.
Excellent. And you will learn whether another kid dies. No, I think after Greg really that one really hurt you, right?
I was busy.
Yeah. I think Greg still holds it against me.
I think I drowned in a former life.
I killed that little kid, but he's still dead. Sorry. So.
And what was the?
I was to say it was so senseless.
Oh, maybe not.
What?
Well, he's still dead. That doesn't mean he stays dead or whatever.
No, he stays dead.
Damn it!
I'm very sorry.
You can't give the man a little hope.
Maybe he doesn't stay dead.
Maybe. Yeah. Thanks, Dan.
Good.
No, I feel better.
Problem solved.
And
That's right. Anything could happen.
and then we will go into another chapter, the Act 2, Chapter 11, which is Revelations 2:1 after this one. And then if you want, we can even do another one. That will be a group decision. But for now, let's jump into the next one, Act 2, Chapter 10, A Growing List of Charges. All right, folks, what you got? Brad folded his arms and rested them on the table. Nael found his smile slightly unsettling. Brad's tone gave Aiden pause. He sought inspiration around the table, but found none. He cleared his throat. Well, we followed and infiltrated the caravan, he said. And? It was a decoy, like you said. That sounds like an astute observation. Care to share why you reached that conclusion? Aiden hesitated. Go on, I need the details before I pay you, Brad prompted. Right. Okay, so Garrett managed to get into one of the carts overnight, and he found the fake box, basically. Oh? Brad turned to Garrett. And how did you judge it to be fake? It was painted with magic paint, Garrett exclaimed happily. Magic paint? Yeah, it glowed in the dark. You mean it was covered with glowing ink? No, dude, it was a magical aura. Like, the magic of the real boxes, the ones that lift the ships? Same color of aura, but this time it came from the paint rather than whatever's in the box, Garrett explained. Brad sat back in his chair. Interesting, he said. Yeah, no idea why anyone would go to the trouble of doing it, but they did. Indeed. Did you find anything else? Also, I heard reports that a Lavatown stormtrooper was killed mysteriously by an arrow that materialized from thin air when they were trying to arrest a stowaway in the same caravan, which happened to be a gnome. Know anything about that? The group exchanged a quick glance, then Aiden shook his head. No, we didn't, and no, we don't, he responded in a measured tone, holding Brad's gaze. Okay, then. I choose to believe you, Brad grinned. He closed his eyes for a few moments, then opened them and said, It fits. Fits what? Nael asked. Our theory of who was behind all this. Listen, you guys, you did a good job, so I'm going to give you a choice. A choice? Yes, you can either get paid the 2 gold each that I promised you, and we can part ways. Or you could still earn the full reward if you take on another mission for me. There was stunned silence as everybody looked first at Brad, then each other, in disbelief. Finally, Lormic spoke. What do you want us to do? Just look at this place, Lormic murmured. It was almost dusk. They were sitting at the corner of a small park, neatly situated within a cluster of tidy-looking buildings. Lormic's face was hidden by the folds of his cloak. Solis had acquired a new yellow Breton that matched the color of her hair, and Aiden's scar was masked by a partial face covering. Looks like a totally different world. It is, said Garrett. I grew up over there. He was pointing in a direction alongside the curving inner wall of the volcano, and the shallows might as well be 1,000 miles away rather than just 1,000 feet below us. Everything is so clean, Niall whispered in awe. So which one is it again? Garrett pointed towards the narrow 3-story building across from them. People were streaming out of it, heading in different directions. That's the one. My father also has an office there. I know the building well. And you're sure you can get us in? Oh, yeah. It wasn't too long ago that this was where I spent many of my days. Things don't change that much up here. Let's just wait a little bit longer to make sure the laggards have left, Garrett responded, without shifting his gaze away from the building. Garrett thought back to his childhood and how normal it all seemed then. He chuckled quietly to himself with the new perspective gained after a couple of years in the shallows. There he awoke from his reverie and pointed at the diminutive figure emerging out of the building. That's the snake. He always leaves last. The short man stopped to look around the area. His eyes shifted over the park, locking momentarily on their little group. Then he left, his confident stride purposeful and measured. Lormic was uncomfortable. Damn, it's like he can see right into my soul, he murmured. Yeah, I felt it too, Niall whispered nervously. The others nodded and Garrett said, the snake, all the snakes really, as far as I can tell, are always like that. They have to be, I suppose. Anyway, the coast is clear. Follow me. I'll take us through a back door. Brad said it was on the 2nd floor, right? Niall asked, keeping her voice low. Right. We just need to find it. As a kid, I wasn't paying too much attention to who was where, and many of these offices change hands frequently to match internal appointments and power dynamics in the guilds and the merchant houses, Garrett responded. And we're looking for a title, right? Not a name? Yes. They never put the names on any of these. If you need to look for someone by name, then you shouldn't be here. Anyway, it's the first aid to the Pope. Pop aid, Garrett chuckled. So look for the papal icon and the number 1 next to it. That would designate the correct office. I think I see it, Solis gestured towards a door at the end of the hallway. Looks like it, Garrett looked and nodded. Okay, listen, this is where it can get a bit tricky. My father always mentioned that we had to be out of here before sundown or we'd have to stay until morning. I don't know why, but I'm assuming wards come alive at that time or something. We gotta be careful. As if to reinforce his words, as the last rays of sunlight faded and the hallway fell into darkness, the surrounding doors made a series of clicking noises. Shit, Lormic exclaimed. I just tried the door back to the stairway. It's locked. How the hell does a door lock itself? Asked Aiden. No, don't answer that, Solis. Is that something you can undo? Not sure. I could try. I've played around with physical manipulation enough that I can work simple locks, but I suspect these doors are pretty complex mechanisms, she responded. Don't try, said Garrett. They have alarms too, so if you screw it up, the place will go nuts. Listen, I can pick at least some locks without triggering anything, but there's no point in turning back before we even try to go forward. With that said, Solis, can you give us a bit of magic light? A point of illumination suddenly appeared near the ceiling. In the total darkness, the otherwise dim light source shone brightly and lit almost the entire corridor. Looking up, they saw that it was situated on the brim of Solis's new hat. Seemed logical. Goes perfectly with the yellow, she grinned. That's so cool, Garrett said. All right, let's have a look. He started tiptoeing carefully across the hallway, moving this way and that. About a third of the way through, he abruptly stopped and crouched down. Just as I thought, he gestured a few inches off the floor. Tripwire, released when the door's locked. He examined the wall closely. Damn, this is excellent craftsmanship. You can't even see its mounting slots, totally concealed in the design. He turned back to his appreciative audience. Why don't you all move towards me? When you get here, you step over the wire, but I need the light closer so I can check the rest of the corridor. They successfully negotiated the tripwire and its identical counterpart further down the hallway, as well as the pressure plate set right in the middle. Garrett was only saved by being so light that a brief misstep on its corner did not trigger it. Then they found themselves before the Popades door. After examining it closely, Garrett looked up. I don't even think it's locked. Should I open it, he asked. They all looked at each other, but nobody spoke. After a few seconds, Garrett shrugged his shoulders and tried the handle. The door slid open quietly. Even in the dim light, it was clear the office was tastefully arranged. It had a big mahogany desk and heavy velvet-covered chairs, and a heavy velvet-covered chair at the far end by the window, a big file drawer and a couple of bookshelves, and a smaller round table to one side with several plush chairs around it. The thick rug cushioned their steps and absorbed any noise they might have otherwise made. Nael took off her shoes and let her toes sink into the carpet. Damn, that feels nice, she said, letting out a small sigh. Yeah, the furniture is exquisite too, really well made, Aidan murmured as his hand caressed the top of the side table. Very little pain in it. So that's how they live out here, is it? Lomek whispered, his voice sounding strained. I wonder how many churches my dad could build for the cost of one of these chairs. Nael touched his arm in sympathy. Sorry, I just got caught in the moment. Like that stupid merchant and his stupid cigarettes. Each one of those could feed an entire family for a few days in the Shallows, he said in a resigned voice. That's just an office, Garrett said cheerfully. You should see some of the houses, man. He moved around the office desk and tried to pull open a drawer. Locked. Should I try to pick it? Before you do that, let's check out the bookshelves. Brad said that what we're looking for might be hidden in plain sight. Plus, it's been too easy so far. I'm a little suspicious, Nael cautioned. Sure, Garrett looked around. I miss having books around. Growing up, we had our own little library, and all my friends had them too. Looks like this guy's writing one, actually. He climbed up on the big office chair and turned over a sheaf of notes that was laying on the table. There's the title page. Let's see. Inferior Critters, Stinkrats, Mothers, and the Chain That Binds Them. Shit. He raised his eyes and looked at Lomek. I'm sorry. Lomek's face betrayed little emotion. He spoke softly. The deepest hatred is the quietest, he said. At least in the Shallows, they call me names openly. Nael squeezed his arm again, and Aidan placed a hand on his shoulder. Don't you worry, little mother. We'll bring this fucker down, he said, a glint in his eye. Lomek smiled back at him. Solis, who had been quiet until that moment, suddenly exclaimed. Her eyes were strangely lit by the light shining at the brim of her hat, and she was clearly oblivious to the emotions in the room. I think I finally got it. Got what? Asked Nael with a hint of exasperation. I've been working up this effect to see magical auras around me. I figured if I could alter the environment using magical energy, then maybe I can also make concentrations of magical energy stand out. That thing is, it's been difficult to develop because I've never had a lot of to experiment with. But I think I've got it now, she said with satisfaction. So you can see magic stuff? Garrett asked as he leaned back into the chair. I think so, kind of. It's quite limited, but I can see a small word on the file cabinet, and also that something magical was inside a book right there. Solis pointed towards a lower shelf on one of the bookcases. Nael bent to open it. No, not that one, right? Once again, yep, that's it, Solis instructed. Nael opened the book and began flipping through it. Oh, she exclaimed as a loose piece of paper fell out. She unfolded it on the desk. Solis, can you come closer? I need the light. They leaned over her shoulder to examine the paper. It had a drawing in the center and was covered in symbols and notations in a highly regular script that none of them recognized. Few markings were added in pencil, which they could read but made little sense, and those all had question marks next to them. Someone wrote manual at the top? Maybe it's some sort of magic book? Solis, are you sure this was the magical thing you saw? Nael asked. Well, not quite sure. It could have been the book itself, but I suspect it is. The book looks rather ordinary, she answered. I have no idea how a piece of paper can be magical, though. I bet you it's this right here, said Garrett, who had been peering closely at the paper. He turned it over to them and pointed at the bottom right corner. It seemed like someone had spilled some ink covering a paragraph of the strange script. Solis, can you turn off your light for a moment? Sure, it's my easiest magic. Doesn't take much effort, she said. She moved her fingers and the room fell into darkness. They could hear Garrett hop off the chair, and a second later, a tiny sliver of moonlight came through the window as he pulled aside the curtain. They let a few moments pass as their eyes adjusted. There, do you see it? Garrett exclaimed. The page was emitting a faint ore. See? It's magic paint, just like the box in the wagon. It certainly seems to be the proof we need. We'll take it with us. We can figure this stuff out later before we give it to Brad. Lomek, are you okay? Nael turned her head towards Lomek, who had moved to stand in front of the other bookshelf. I know this woman, he said. He reached his hand and pulled something off the shelf. As he did, the sound of a wire snapping resounded through the darkened room. Uh-oh, said Garrett. I think we triggered an alarm. As if to echo his sentiment, they could suddenly hear the faint sound of footsteps. Doesn't sound like we have too long before they get here. Can we get out through that window? Aidan asked. Let me check. Garrett climbed up the chair to try the window. It's locked. Hold on. Pulling something out of his pocket, he started fiddling with the lock. They all waited anxiously, their breaths being the only other sound in the room. I think they just got to the hallway, whispered Solis, who had been listening intently. We don't have much time left. Got it. Garrett opened the window and peered outside. Who wants to go first? Solis came last, her tall frame diving theatrically out of the window before floating gently to the ground, a smile on her face. A door slammed above, and the guards shouted the alarm. As they made a hasty retreat into a narrow alley, Aidan looked back to see a head peering out of the window, scanning the courtyard. Nael plumped heavily against the wall and winced in pain. I hurt my ankle after that jump, she said through gritted teeth. It hurts a lot. I don't think I can walk on it anymore. Lomek bent to her, put his hands on her ankle, and uttered a short prayer. A white aura enveloped her ankle. After a minute, he shook his head. You sprained it all right, I took care of that, but you broke your heel, and I can't mend broken bones. We should go see my dad. First, we have to clear out of this area, and quickly, Garrett said. They will be looking for us, and while I can probably explain my own presence, it's going to be much harder for the rest of you. Especially you, Lomek, he added apologetically. Don't worry about it. I saw enough in that office, Lomek shook his head. Bigger problem is Nael can't walk, and she won't be easy to carry. The sound of running guards were getting closer. I'll be okay, Nael said before standing up shakily. She took a step forward, then stumbled badly, grabbing onto Aidan. She groaned. Lomek came over and guided her hand down on his shoulder. Aidan and I can support you, he said, as she balanced awkwardly between them. Garrett nodded. All right, we gotta go. Now, follow me. As they went, Solis listened remotely, occasionally signaling a stop to let a patrol by. Nael, in turn, projected phantom noises away from them to distract any guards that came too close. After 20 minutes of weaving in and out of an endless maze of narrow alleyways, Garrett held up his hand. They stopped. Damn. Looks like they have the main shelf entrances and exits covered, he said. Didn't you say your family's house is around here? Can't we go there? Aidan asked. That would be worse than simply getting caught, trust me, Garrett said. My parents made their feelings clear to me when I left. They would turn us in and recommend that they make an example out of us. We'd get tossed into the secret prison. And if we're lucky and they don't simply execute us for stealing from them. That guy we just robbed, he would be one of the key people making the decision on the at the tribunal. And let's not forget the murder charge that they still need to pin on someone, he added with a grimace. So what now? We can't just stay here. Even if they don't find us tonight, we'll get caught easily in the daytime. Garrett spread his hands. Don't know, he said resignedly. Everyone peered around corners and tried doors, hoping to find another escape route. Stop looking at me like that. You're creeping me out, Solis exclaimed suddenly. What's going on? And we should keep quiet. While they're stopped searching until the morning, there are still patrols about. Garrett's voice sounded unusually grave. He keeps looking at me like he wants to eat me, or I don't know, but it's freaking me out, Solis responded in a low voice. Who is looking at you like that? Asked Aidan. He is, Solis pointed at Lomek. Aidan turned to Lomek. What's this about, buddy? Lomek lowered his eyes to the ground. I just had a thought, he murmured. I'm sorry. They could practically hear Solis's eyes rolling in her head as she whispered, Yeah, I'm sure you did. Aidan looked meaningfully at Nael. What kind of thought? He pressed. Lomek didn't respond. Come on, man, we can't have this sort of thing going on. Well, Lomax started, then cleared his throat hesitantly. I thought that maybe if we all, stay really close to each other, like really, really close, then maybe she can float us all of us down to a lower shelf. Everyone raised their heads and stared at Lomax as Solis glared. I'm really sorry, Solis. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable, he whispered in a plaintive tone. What? No, wait. Wow, shit, that might actually work, Aiden said. He turned to Solis. Do you think it might work, he asked? Might work, he asked? Slowly turning her head toward him, Solis responded. I have no clue, she sounded defensive. I just barely learned how the effect works. But with everything else, it's a matter of energy. Jumping out the window required very little effort. Cushioning and drop between shelves will require a lot more. And then if we add the rest of you, maybe I can? It for sure will exhaust me at the very least. Let's at least check out the idea. Garrett, can you lead us to the edge of the shelf, someplace where the guards won't easily see us? Can a ship fly in Trade Bay? Duh, of course I can, Garrett responded cheerfully. With Garrett acting as a guide, they found themselves standing at a gutter that ended abruptly with a tall, locked wooden grate. Garrett pointed at it. It's used to funnel rainwater down. Open the grate and you can jump down to your death. It doesn't happen too often up here, but you wouldn't be the first to do it. You want to open it? Asked Aiden. Actually, it's better if you do it. They do try to stop people from jumping. The locks are really excellent, and they are trapped too. So if you try to pick one and fail, it will sound an alarm and it will be right at square one, except with nowhere to hide, Garrett responded. So what can I do? Aiden sounded confused. Talk to the wood, man. After a moment's thought, Aiden reached out to the grate. Several minutes passed, and then he pulled his hand back. Garrett looked at him. Everything okay? Yep, check it out now, Aiden grinned. Garrett pulled on the grate. It swung open easily, the lock still hanging on the frame behind, untouched. Cool, he said, then laid down to peer over the ledge. What does it look like? Niall asked. A sheer drop like you'd expect. Looks like our best bet is to aim for Trade Bay. The docks platform isn't active this time of night. And once we land, there are tons of ways to get down to the shallows from there, Garrett answered. It's a few hundred feet, so he turned to look at them. Are we actually doing this? You can probably stay behind and come down the regular way, Aiden said to Garrett. What, and miss it? No way, Garrett said cheerfully. They looked at each other, then at Solis, who shrugged her shoulders and raised her palms. Won't know until I try, she said. Anybody want to pull out? Aiden asked. No? All right. Let's tie ourselves together. Who has the rope? A ragtag group of five suddenly materialized in the air off the edge of a shelf high up in the middle of the volcano. They fell, their trajectory taking them towards the massive floating dock below them. Suddenly, improbably, their fall began to slow. As they decelerated rapidly, a couple of small boxes on the dock underneath them seemed to move by themselves, pushed aside by an expanding air bubble. The tallest in the group was holding her hands up in the air, her fingers tracing mysterious sigils, which glowed faintly in a yellowish blue color before fading away. Her eyes were lit brightly, in the same color. Her long hair, shining silver in the moonlight, was flying wildly in every direction. Suddenly, only a few feet above the ground, her hand suddenly froze, her eyes closed, and she said, "It smells nice. I think I'll take a nap now." Gravity took over and the group crashed onto the platform. One of the women yelped in pain as they hit the floor. A few seconds later, a yellow, wide-brimmed hat floated down and settled beside them.
I like the way you went to like the third person perspective view of what they were doing at the end there. Like wasn't from one of them's their perspective, but it was outside.
Yeah, it's not a device you see very often.
It was pretty cool.
Thank you. I like the perspective shifts.
I have two clarifying questions. Why was it that Garrett was going to be okay if he was seen, but no one else? I mean,
Because he grew up there, so he knew how to get around, right? Remember, Garrett is the one character that didn't come from the shallows,
okay.
right? He was a kid that grew up in a merchant family and
He belongs.
he belongs, right? That's how they got up there in the first place, too.
And what did they steal from the office?
Ultimately, only that piece of paper,
Okay.
but also something that Lomax, grabbed off the shelf, which apparently triggered an alarm.
Oh, I didn't know he took it with. I heard that like you tripped an alarm. I didn't
He
know
grabbed
took it with
something,
him.
but he grabbed something and they heard him trip the alarm. But I can tell you, he just took it with him.
What
He
was
was
it?
basically saying, "Oh, I know this one, so probably it's a painting or something like that, right?" we don't know yet what it is, but that's what he said. He said, "Oh, I know this woman," and he grabbed it, and then, all hell broke loose.
So they stole something of value to somebody.
To somebody, yeah, they do. Well, I mean, they're in the Pop 8's office, so perhaps it's right. Who turns out to be a closeted, perhaps not even very closeted, deep racist kind of thing, right? So
Feels like they wear it on the outside there.
yeah.
Was this the first time we mentioned anything about popes and papples?
No, we discussed the fact that that one of the city leaders is the Pope in the Garrett chapter. It's
Okay.
called the Pope. That's the person who's in charge of ensuring that no particular religion stands supreme,
I forgot that or missed it the
right?
first time.
Yeah, yeah. So that's what the Pope is, and so this is his first aid. That's like think of a political machinery.
Interesting that you chose to call it a pope that's supposed to keep religions equal, not so that one.
Right? Interesting, right?
Yeah,
Something weird about this world.
well, it's unsettling that.
Only one
you
thing,
Do
though.
that kind of shit.
You're correct that this is weird. There's a reason why it's weird,
Yeah, to make sure we're paying attention.
and I think we're about 12 chapters ahead of behind where it becomes clear as to why. But yes, you're correct. The fact that they're using that term in the way that they're using the term is there's a meaning behind it. There's a reason that it's there.
That's one of the things about like, because that kind of nuance is tough for me to keep track of if we're doing this every 2 weeks. You know what I mean? Because that's a small thing that you didn't want to miss because here it is again. And so I have to ask stupid questions like this.
But now it will be in your mind. Which is why I love it when you all say, what is that? Because then we can have a conversation,
Yeah.
and then the hook is planted, right?
I bet MKB has a lot of questions.
I don't know.
I mean, seeing it, like, you missed a few chapters.
No, I think I'm observing and gradually getting context.
Okay, that's fine.
Although I had a little flight of fancy that the thing that you picked up was not anything of value, but it was just a honeypot that was there
Oh.
specifically as a tripwire.
Oh,
But
Yeah, in that candy jar.
yeah. The honey.
but that's because I was just listening to an ad for a product that does that in your server environment. So.
Well, top of mind. Yeah.
I'm not going to say yes or no because all of these theories are legitimate, right? And you already know because the people who have been here that the Thieves Guild, this organization they're working for, is actually less of a Thieves Guild and more of like a secret intelligence agency, right? So that's not that's definitely not out of the reasonable realm of possibility, right? So I welcome all of these speculations.
And shoot them down.
No, I think they're great.
Oh,
Because they all make
that's why
sense.
I'm going to take notes.
He doesn't have writer's block.
No, I don't have writer's block because it's like they're telling. I'm not even inventing anything. Like I'm literally sitting there listening to them talk and just taking notes. Right, that's in my head. That's what's happening in my head. It's kind of schizophrenic. It's a bit of a trip, right?
So what is your
You're channeling.
what is your process like? Are there specific times that you write, or do you write when you feel
I
inspired?
write morning. I'm usually write better in the morning. That's when my head is clearest. Usually even early morning, it's when I seem to be doing the best.
Early, like before 10.
Like yes, as early as 7, right? 7, 8, something like that. But then it really flows. I write
About when I go to bed.
I write roughly 1,200 words an hour. So and this is essentially the writing, right? This is raw draft, effectively. So what you're hearing is the book as I've written it without, I maybe went back and corrected some grammatic errors, but that's about it. So there's not a lot of
1,200 sounds like a lot to me.
it's pretty fast when I'm in the but the point is I'm not writing them like the way that it feels to me is like I'm just describing what's happening from, so I have to write as quickly as possible because they're talking to each other. These little fuckers in my head, Sometimes I have to tell them to quiet for a second, stop, pause, please. I need to capture everything.
How much editing are you doing, like relative, like, say 1,200 words per hour, and then you go back and edit for an hour? What was it like?
Very little. For every hour of writing, maybe 10 minutes of
Wow.
work. Yeah, it's this is fairly close to
That's
Roger.
shocking. It really is.
So
Maybe it's shocking because I can't do it.
that's my
There are a few
process.
writers that could do this. Really happy.
Anything else, or should we move to the next one?
Ones that can't.
Go for the next one.
All right. Dan, anything from you?
Nothing at this point. Nothing that you know is different from stuff everybody else is talking about.
All righty. So
Oh, wait. Is it, Lomic that can heal people?
Lomic is the one that can heal people.
But he couldn't do bones. Can his dad do bones?
Yes.
Okay. Is it something that Lomic will evolve to be able to do? Is he just kind of stuck? Because
All these excellent questions are just so valuable and important to understand.
okay, I'll just wait.
Now shut it and listen.
You're asking me to tell you what's going to happen
Very
down the
nice
road.
way to put what you just put. so.
I mean, so you know that, I mean, no, but look, Greg, but it's important. This is actually an important question, right? So when you think this is the first time that they're operating as a group, right? In this act, they've been learning to know each other and trust each other. This is the first time they're working as a group. It's actually a descriptive of them working as a group. You know, they're walking around. One of them is kind of, you know, on one foot, but she's throwing sounds to
Yeah.
confuse the guards, and the
Take
other
care
one
of
is
each other.
right. You know, they're becoming a team, right? They're gelling, and
Yeah, and
that's
you're doing a good job with that, because at first, there was distrust.
right.
In the early chapters.
Yeah.
And now it's like they can't get by without.
Right, they have no
watching each
choice
other's
now,
back.
right? And so they learn to trust each other through necessity, right? And that's part of the importance of all these machinations they have to go through, right?
Thanks. I had great sushi right before. I came. Thank you. Best
You
sushi
know,
ever.
the theme from the last reading was the co-opetition, the competition, the cooperation is still pretty evident. It's like that back and forth. They're trying to cross the boundary of competitiveness, but they still rally to be cooperative. It's pretty interesting,
Yeah,
So-
more and more, it's like it's ratchet effect.
Yeah. Yep. So, and this is what happens, right? The necessity forces them to come together. All right, let's move to the next one. Act 2, Chapter 11, Revelations 2:1. By the way, Act 2 is also called the Book of Revelations. So,
I did not remember that. If you
Yeah.
know this.
so this is Act 2, Chapter 11, Revelations 2:1. All right. Any changes? Niall asked. Nope, still the same, Aidan sighed as he looked back across the room from the bed where Solace was laying. It's amazing that she was able to do that, saved all our asses. I can't imagine what they would have done to us if we got caught. No kidding, Garrett's feet were dangling off the top bunk. Plus, it was so cool, wasn't it? The way the air moved? I never thought I'd fly, I'll tell you that. Yeah, well, if it means she dies, then I'm not sure it was worth it. Lomac's eyes were rooted to the floor. Aidan looked at Niall, who nodded slightly. He said, "Hey, Garrett, looks like the sun is coming up. I know it's early, but do you mind going down to see if you can arrange some breakfast for us?" Sure thing, Garrett jumped down, landing on all fours. Aidan waited until Garrett left the room and cleared his throat. Okay, Lomac, we need to talk. Lomac raised his head towards Aidan in surprise. Talk? About what? Aidan exchanged another glance with Niall. Following his gaze, Lomac demanded, "What's going on?" Well, Aidan started uncomfortably, then looked helplessly at Niall. She spoke. "We need to talk about you and Solace." Me and Solace? How so? That's what we want to know, Niall responded calmly. But what do you mean? Know what? There's nothing going on between us. For one thing, she said that you were looking at her funny. But I was just making a suggestion, Lomac said, sounding defensive. Yes, that's what you said, but clearly not what she felt, and she indicated it had been happening long before them. Well, that's unfair, isn't it? Maybe she's wrong, and I apologized immediately. Oh, yes, you did. In fact, you said that you didn't mean to make her uncomfortable, but it was the way you said it. Why would you say it like that? Niall asked. Lomek didn't answer. Nael, we need to tell him, Aidan said in a low voice. Tell me what? What we saw, Nael responded. What you saw? Yes, back when we made camp after the bridge. Aidan was standing watch when it happened, and he woke me up. Lomek's eyes moved back and forth between the other two. You were all sleeping, but Lomek, you had this aura that came off of you. It looked like you, only sort of ethereal. Then it moved over to Solace, and, well, I'm not sure how to describe it, but you, or your ethereal form anyway, touched her chest, and then, well, entered her, Nael concluded, then looked back at Aidan. Huh? Lomek sounded genuinely surprised. Aidan answered, yes, like your hand reached out to her breasts and then your whole body sort of dissipated into hers as she was sleeping. It was very strange, creepy, honestly. Why didn't you wake me up? Because the aura was magical and I was afraid it would burn us, Aidan responded. Now, do you care to explain what you did to her and why? A long moment passed, the only sound being the regular breathing coming from the bed. Then Lomek sighed. I might as well tell you, he said. Tell us what? Nael asked severely. It's not like that, Lomek responded. I'm not sure how to explain it, actually. Try. Well, ever since we met outside the inn, and especially after she fell from the stairway, I've been feeling this weird compulsion. No, you don't understand. It's not that kind of compulsion. Like, I don't want to fuck her or anything. It's not that. It isn't? Nael sounded skeptical. No, it's different. Like she's a part of me. Like, say you lost a limb in a fight or something, right? And then you think you still have it? You know what I mean? A ghost limb, yes, Aidan said. My dad told me about it when he was teaching me how to hunt in case it happened to me. Right. Well, it's going to sound crazy, but from all I can tell, it's like that. Like she has one of my limbs, and I have this insane desire to have it back, Lomek concluded in a pained voice. Aidan walked over and sat next to Lomek. But you have all your limbs, don't you? He said. Of course, yes. Which is why this is so confusing. I can't make sense of it. But the feeling is so strong. I do my best to contain it, but sometimes it just comes out and I can't stop myself from staring. Tears were streaming down Lomek's face. Aidan put his hands across his shoulders. Taking it at face value for the moment, is it possible that this compulsion, could it present itself magically this way, Nael wondered? I've never heard of anything like that. And what does it mean? Why would you think that Solace had one of your limbs? And which one could it possibly be? I don't know, Lomek cried and buried his face in his hands. At that very moment, the door opened, Garrett burst into the room, carrying a big tray of food, and he announced triumphantly, "Who's your daddy?"
Not what I expected.
Icebreaker.
Interlude. Solace dreams again. You're welcome, baby. Solace finds herself sitting in the middle of a room with walls the color of her magic, its aura providing illumination. It's not a large room, although it has 6 walls instead of the customary 4. She sits alone on the floor, and a puzzle is laying in front of her. How long have I been working on this? She wonders aloud. Has it been hours, days, maybe decades? It's a special puzzle. Right now, it simply shows her face, but she vaguely remembers that there was a set of instructions and that by inserting the last piece, the image of her face will be transformed into something else. A hugely, massively important clue to something. Have I been here before? The thought springs unbidden into her mind. She knows somehow that her fate hangs in the balance. Maybe the fate of the world, too. All she has to do is interpret that final clue. Solace is holding the last piece in her hand. She smiles. The excitement of finally finishing the puzzle that has troubled her for so long makes her vision blur, and she worries that she would not recognize the picture revealed. Rubbing her eyes, she reassures herself that placing the last piece will surely clear her vision. It is time. Her fingers are shaking slightly, making it difficult to insert that last piece. Eventually, she manages to place it right in the center of the puzzle. Her vision clears, and then, just as she knew it would, the image shifts. 3 new shapes replace the image of her face. 3 people. She's one of them. But before she can examine the newly revealed portraits, a sudden gust of wind blows up through cracks in the floor and scrambles the puzzle to a million little pieces. She realizes that she would have to do it all over again. Solace swears loudly as frustration and anger overcome her. They were finishing up their meal when suddenly, with no warning, Solace sat up straight in her bed with a blood-curdling scream, cut short by a yelp of pain as her forehead banged into the bunk above. Jumping from his chair, Aidan rushed over and held Solace's hand. "Are you all right?" Solace sat on the side of the bed, rubbing her head where she could already feel a new welt forming. She said weakly, "I think I had a nightmare." Lomek brought a glass of water and handed it to her awkwardly. She looked at him in confusion, then took it with a sigh. Her eyes scanned the room. "Why didn't you guys wake me up?" she croaked. "We tried. We were worried you might not wake up at all," Aidan answered. "I was unconscious?" Aidan nodded. "How are you feeling now?" Solace looked up to him. "A little groggy and I have a nasty migraine, but okay otherwise," she responded. "What happened? All I can remember is trying as hard as I could to slow our fall. It was by far the biggest magic I'd ever done. And then suddenly it all went black." "You got us down safely, all right," Garrett exclaimed cheerfully. "Crashed down the last few feet, but it was the coolest thing I'd ever done. Oh, and Niall hurt her foot again when we landed." He gestured at the wooden crutch leaning against Niall's chair. "Hurt her foot when someone decided to shift positions at the last second to avoid hurting himself, you mean?" Niall said. "Well, yeah," Garrett admitted sheepishly. "Aidan crafted her the crutch," he added by way of explanation. Solace drained her cup and stood up slowly. "I'll be all right. It just takes time to recover my magical capacity. Based on past experience, every time I push this hard without killing myself, I can do a little bit more the next time. I get more in tune with the energy, like the magic itself trusts me more, recognizes my body as a more reliable vessel. I have something similar with shaping sounds, but after a while, I hit a point where I could no longer push," Niall said, a hint of frustration in her voice. "Yeah, maybe I'll hit one too," Solace said. "Who knows? From what I know, properly trained wizards also have limits. It's just that they are a lot more effective in knowing and using what they have. I just go until I can't anymore," she smiled. "Anyway, what's the plan?" "We were going to go over that piece of paper we recovered before handing it over to Brad," Lomek said. "All right then," Solace walked over to the table. "Deal me in." They looked at the page again. "I've never seen anything written so regularly," remarked Niall. "It's absolutely fascinating. Other than the words in pencil, which I think were added later, there are no variations or gaps in the gaps between symbols or words, no changes in ink pressure, no differences in similar letters across the page, assuming the symbols are letters, of course." "They have to be," Lomek said. "Yeah, it's really odd." "Maybe they weren't written," Solace suggested. "What do you mean?" Niall asked. "Well, back in that office, you asked if I thought it was from a wizarding book, and I'm pretty sure it isn't, but it might have been made with magic." "You mean the page was written magically? Why would anyone do that?" "Exactly, and I don't know, but it's certainly possible. Now that I've seen it, I could try and recreate the effect. Say, to copy a book onto a blank one without having to actually write it by hand. It wouldn't even require a lot of energy, just a lot of concentration." "That's a cool idea, but wouldn't it be a waste of time for a wizard to sit there while a book copied itself?" Garrett wondered. "I should think so. Look, I'm not saying it's reasonable, only that it's possible," Solace answered, "and it might prevent mistakes in transcribing if you do it right." Lomek, who had been peering at the page closely, suddenly raised his hand. "Who's got that metal hexagon Garrett found?" he asked. Aidan laid it on the table next to the page. Lomek picked it up, examined it closely, and laid it back down. "There," Lomek said. "See these symbols on the page?" He pointed at the drawing in the center. "Compare them to the tiny runes on the side of that thing. They're exactly the same." They took turns examining the page and the item. Aidan was last. As he examined the two, he suddenly smiled, and to everyone's shock, started folding the paper. "What are you doing?" Niall demanded, trying to grab it out of his hands. "Just give me a moment. I think I figured out something. Hold on." "There," Aidan held out the page, folded neatly so only the drawing was visible. "Just imagine a real object like in the drawing. Doesn't it look like a fat, flat screw?" A couple of seconds passed. Then Niall said hesitantly, "Yes, I think so. It doesn't look like any screw I'd ever seen, though. Without a sharp end, how would you screw it into wood?" "You're right. It doesn't look like a screw because it isn't, I think. However," Aidan held the metal bit next to the flat tip. "Look at it now. Do you see? Say you already had a hole and you wanted to join two boards, but you also wanted to be able to take them apart sometime. You would put this weird screw in on one end, and then you would use this item on the other end to secure it. And if you needed to take things apart, it would be easy. Just unscrew the two pieces and they come apart while staying whole. He turned to Lormic. You've seen a fair bit of construction at your dad's church, right? What do you think? Lormic smiled. Yeah, I think you're right. I can think of a lot of applications for something like this. Whoa, that's genius. And how I understand the grooves on the inside of the holy thing. Otherwise, the screw won't tighten, Niall mused. I can't imagine any smith skilled enough to create this with enough precision, though, especially on the inside of the, shall we call it a tightener, since we think it's used to tighten the weird screw? Lormic nodded. Yeah, tightener is a good name for it. And maybe we can call the screw that isn't really a screw, how about a driver? Because you drive it through a hole? Right, driver and tightener. So I totally see how this could be really cool for building stuff, but how would you make them fit one another? Magic, perhaps? Lormic turned to Solace, who shrugged her shoulders and nodded non-committally. Then she added, I suppose you could, but I still have no idea what it's made of. And remember, you can't make something out of nothing with magic. So whatever metal they used is something we'd never heard of. Lormic nodded. I know what the runes mean, Garrett shouted with sudden excitement. They all turned to him. It's for sizing. It has to be. Say you were making these drivers and tighteners to build things. You'd need them all in different sizes, right? Well, you'd need to be able to sort them out somehow so you don't waste tons of time matching them to each other. So these runes must represent sizes. As long as the driver and tightener have the same runes on them, you would know they matched. And I think that probably also means they are numbers, right? Everyone was staring at Garrett in surprise. Then Aidan spoke. You know, Garrett, that actually makes a lot of sense. And I really like this idea. It means you could combine wooden parts with each other in a way that wasn't so violent. He looked at the group. Look, you guys, we need to report to Brad and give him this drawing. But I say, after we collect our reward, let's book a trip to Quaranta City, which we could easily afford at that point. I'm sure we can find someone there who could shed more light on this. Plus, I wouldn't mind staying out of town for a bit, he added, smiling uneasily. At least not until they give up looking for whoever killed the stormtrooper, you know. Garrett started a little dance. First we fly, then we're going to Quaranta City, he exclaimed. How cool is that?
So they found a screw.
No, first they found the little hexagon thing, which we now know is a nut. And then they found what looks like, anybody care to say?
A bolt.
Well, a picture of a bolt on something that looks very much like a printed page, right?
So it's a plan for something. Blueprint for something.
Like what the hell are these things doing in a world that's kind of late Middle Ages?
Right.
Who knows?
Well, yeah, but I assume that there was some sort of technology to build the ships, to build things that we've already been seeing,
No.
but that was an assumption.
So this isn't a technology that we've seen.
Well, there is no technology in this world in the way that we think about it. Nuts and bolts are so unusual that they've
Right.
never seen it
I
before.
got that. So then I-
So we're talking about a level of technology that's appropriate to early Renaissance, late Middle Ages, early Renaissance period.
/ not magic floating box.
So now it has magic, which changes things, right? But yeah. So there's a problem. Now add that to the rest of the problems that y'all have picked up on, and perhaps a couple that you haven't even picked up on, and we have a mystery.
Time travel.
On top of that, we still need to figure out who the daddy is.
Who's your daddy?
That
Yeah, that was.
was a classic Garrett moment. Come on.
Not time travel per se, but some sort of a way of moving between realms. And there's another realm. It might be this exact same timeline, but separated enough and happened to have developed technology.
Okay,
That's my
that might
question.
not be a time
That's
travel.
a theory.
Where's the porting?
That's a theory. I can tell you that when Garrett said that in my head, I cracked up just as much as you did.
Yeah.
Because I'm just reporting on it. I was like laughing there for 30 seconds. Like, that's so funny, Garrett.
That was unexpected.
I have another one if you want to move to a third chapter for tonight. That's totally up to you. That's a group decision. I brought a third.
I need to move my legs a little bit.
Yeah.
Still sit low.
But yeah, so what's happening now is not only are they becoming more of a group together, they're also starting to unravel the fact that there's a mysterious mystery. Yeah. Mysterious mystery. Akhilesh, any questions, concerns, comments?
No, I'm following. I'm so used to your super descriptive, info. Like the last time I was imagining they crossing the bridge, they crossing all that. Today's descriptive, but not as descriptive as the last time. So I'm just reminiscing from the previous one. I'm still there. It's okay. I'm trying to imagine how they're talking, how their communication is improved over time. Earlier they were kind of not as coordinated, but they now feel a lot more coordinated as a group. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, so there's definitely, you're detecting a narrative shift. The story became a lot more dialogue driven, is what, basically, and you're correct. And that's intentional, right? Because the characters gain depth. So from my perspective, that depth gets expressed through the way they interact with each other.
Yeah, and earlier it was a lot more extraneous around the characters that you were describing. Now you're describing the characters itself more intently, and it is different. It's
right, and so that's indicated by the narrative style, the shift in the narrative style, which is intentional, right? So there's very little in this book that's not intentional. So when I shift narrative styles, there's a reason I'm shifting narrative styles. When there's all of this, so you're detecting a purposeful shift.
I know there's
and you will see a bunch of this stuff happening, sort of like the back and forth. So there might be a reason. For example, this chapter we're going into, which is Karantha City, is going to give you how I told you at the beginning, we kind of were very high level, and I gave you corners of the tapestry, right? Then we came down and we kind of saw Lavatown from above. Then we sank down all the way to the level of the streets, right? Now we're going to zoom out a little bit again, because I'm going to show you some more of this world that they're in. And this will also impact the narrative style. So all of this is intentional.
I'm sure it is.
Hell, the chapter headings are intentional. The numbers are intentional. All of this is intentional. But Revelations 2:1, did you pick up on that? Because remember the order that I introduced the characters? Solis was 1, Lormic was 2. That chapter was revealing what's happening between Lormic and Solis. Revelations 2:1.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you opened up some mystery there. I hope that I can understand it better.
Right. So the next, I'm opening up all the mysteries, right? Yes, you're correct. Roughly in chapter 16 is where I'm done with the mysteries, and now we're going to start unraveling them.
16 of 2.
Yeah, so we're getting close to the point where there's no more mystery.
It's cool though, and you get, like we've talked about before, there's a couple of anticipatory things going on, strings going on. Like I want you to circle back to it, but I'm curious about it. Did you open it?
Yeah, no, there's definitely again the main kind of like the arc of the book. It's a building, a layering of the mysteries on top of each other. So hopefully you're sufficiently confused by the time we get to that point, but with enough emotional hooks with each layer that when I touch them, you're going to be
Yeah, confusion is not the word I would use. It's more like there's a lot of boxes that you've opened and
Right.
you haven't let us look in them yet.
correct. And I will soon enough. Few more, couple more readings, and we'll get there. And some of the questions you all have been asking will start getting answered.
God damn it.
But they're good questions. You're picking up. I mean, I have a great audience. I love it. I mean, you're kind of getting. I got a really good compliment from somebody else that's not participating, but has been following in the background and was getting really into this, and said, that feels a little bit like the Percy Jackson series in a way, right? It's like. And he was pointing out, he was saying, how he loves the building of this mystery with a background story that he's clearly recognizing there's something happening in the background. that's driving this narrative that we're not exposed to at all.
Not
And
quite.
he said, I love this thing of like trying to figure out through the puzzle, right? Like
Yeah.
what's actually happening behind the scenes that's
Yeah,
causing all this.
there is some like sleuthing thing that like I want to figure this out.
Right.
And you're not giving me.
So that was, for me, that was like an incredible compliment. I'm like, holy shit, that's like, you feel like that. That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, you definitely get the feeling like in the first couple chapters, how you're kind of being told about a story. And then somewhere in, I want to say like the 5th, 6th chapter, you really do start to transition into going on the journey with them, right?
Right. The idea here is that I want you to feel like you're the 6th invisible member of the group, right? That's kind of like what's
That's kind of
the purpose behind how this is written. So hopefully that works. Don't know. It's a lofty attempt, and that's something that's perhaps difficult to pull off. But anyhow, all right, shall we?
Yep.
Act 2, Chapter 12, Korantha City. What are you looking at? The little group was sitting around the campfire. They had just crossed Stormbridge, part of a very large caravan, 12 wagons in all. It was a rarity even on this busy route. The group was one of several who were making the journey, and they were able to keep their own small fire within the camp perimeter. The captain of the guard had just finished making his evening rounds amongst all the travelers, informing them that they were expecting to arrive in Korantha City around midday the next day. It's that portrait that I got at the Poppade's office, Lomac responded softly to Garrett. Everyone else had already laid down to sleep. Right. Damn, in all of the excitement, I forgot all about that. Can I see? Sure, Garrett leaned over and took the small piece of paper. I removed the frame and just kept it. Been carrying it with me since then, Lomac said. Is this ink? Wow, it looks really realistic. I wonder who made it. Must be really good. Garrett looked at the picture. I never even knew you could paint like this. Can I touch it? He asked. Yeah, sure. I tried it too. It doesn't feel like ink. Lomac handed him the picture. Garrett brushed his fingers over it. Crazy, right? Yeah, it's totally flat. Nothing to suggest it's a painting. But I've never seen a drawing like with this kind of color and detail where the result is so normal without any added flourishes. And it's so small. Hell of an artist to have such discipline. I should think it would take ages to create. It doesn't quite look like a drawing, does it? Garrett said. Right. I'm not sure how it was created either. It almost looks like it was made in an instant rather than worked on for a long time. Just look at their facial expressions. Heck, I figure if any of us would have seen something like this before, it would be you, Lomac said ruefully. True, and I haven't. Must have cost a fortune, Garrett said. You know, I think that guy is the Poppade. He pointed at the picture. Wait a second, I remember now. Didn't you say you knew this woman? Isn't that why you took it in the first place? Lomac nodded. Yes, indeed, I do know her. It was just so shocking to find her there, in that place, he sighed. Who is she? Some lady I saved after a really big storm. She was lost in the tunnels, you know. Yeah, growing up, when a big one hit, I remember my parents saying how more people died down there than out in the storm. They seemed to think it was simply part of the economy, kept the deep cave monsters fed, Garrett chuckled. Lomac stared at Garrett for a second. Well, that was a big one, all right. In fact, it was the storm when I got my powers from Thor. Really? How cool. Anyway, I was heading back from the beach, and there was the usual chaos of a storm, and I took a route that most people don't know about, and there she was, about to become a snack. I took her to the church with me, and she left the next morning. A few moons later, she sent me the invitation to meet with Brad. I never even knew her name, Lomac sighed again. Wait, she's the one who invited you? How do you know? Had to be her. Then she must have something to do with the guild, Garrett said. Lomac looked at him in surprise. You're right. I hadn't thought of that. I wonder if Brad would know who she was. Sounds like he might. Damn, I can't get over how real looking it is. Garrett handed the picture back. All right, I'm turning in, he said as he lay down. Good night. Good night, I'll stay up a bit. Okay. Oh, and Lomac. Garrett hesitated for a moment. Thank you for being my friend. The continent of Korantha was the biggest and most populated of all the land masses in the world. It spanned the globe almost all the way between the poles, but its millions of inhabitants congregated away from the oppressively hot equator, a vast desert that would take weeks and tremendous preparation to traverse. South of that desert, even after the temperatures became bearable, the lands were mostly rocky and nearly impossible to cultivate, and so most gentle peoples lived in the northern half. Carantha City was the continent's crown jewel. It was positioned eastward, less than a day's ride from the coast, and 1,000 miles from the North Pole. It was the most beautiful and livable area of Carantha, with fertile lands and gentle hills, the breadbasket of the world. Seen from a great height, the city looked like the center of a web. It's with trade routes snaking away from it towards other population centers on the continent, and a loosely defined border another 1,000 miles away to the south, nearer the equator. That border separated the Caranthian gentle peoples, mostly humans, but also elves, dwarves, and gnomes, from the hardy races, primarily orcs and goblins. The gentle and the hardy races fought continuously and rarely mixed, and most people assumed that this had always been the case. Its ideal location made Carantha City extremely important, so much so that its ruler was largely considered to be the king of all of Carantha, or at least the important parts north of the border. The king, traditionally a human of either gender, would tend to serve between 20 and 30 years at a time. The city's political system was complicated, but it ensured the transitions always occurred peacefully. The current king, however, defied tradition. Her name was Emeka, and she was a fierce dwarven woman who, prior to rising up the ranks of government, was an adventurer. Legends of her forays to both the southern and eastern lands, and in the most fantastical of tellings, worlds beyond this one, were common in the drinking holes of Carantha City. It was true that when she showed up at the city gate some 120 years ago, she rode a wagon chock full of gold and jewels and rare artifacts. She spent her wealth freely, impressing many, while she created a merchant company, the Rocky Road, which in only a matter of decades became the leading trading company in all of Carantha, and involved herself deeply in city affairs. Her fierceness served her well in the complex negotiations her royal position required. And whispers abounded that in private she knew how to temper it to deal with delicate situations. She was strong, skillful, and perhaps most importantly, proved herself to be both reliable and trustworthy. And so 60 years ago, in a move that sent shockwaves throughout the continent and beyond, she became the first dwarf ever to be chosen as Carantha's new king. Wow, Aidan said in wonder. Takes the breath away, doesn't it, Garrett said. I've been here once, but I was too young to remember much detail. Though even then, it certainly left an impression as the biggest, richest place in the world. It sure seems that way, Nael said. I wonder what's that about. She was pointing at a sign which read, Secure your future, join a Rocky Road trade mission, guaranteed food and pay. Seems like they're everywhere. No clue. My parents only talked about local politics when I was growing up. Plus, to be fair, I wasn't paying a whole lot of attention to that stuff. It was really boring, Garrett responded. They rode along the main street leading from the eastern gates toward the city center. All around them were buildings as high as 4 stories tall and businesses of all kinds. There were people everywhere, a constant stream of conversations and dealings, greetings and arguments. Everyone is dressed so nicely, Lolmec murmured. No kidding, I'm actually feeling self-conscious, Solis pulled her hat lower on her head, like when I had to hide my ears as a kid. And to think we were so pleased with ourselves when we bought new outfits for this trip, Nael laughed. I bet you some of these would cost in gold. And the smells, she inhaled deeply and loudly. Damn, I'm getting hungry. At that moment, the wagons drew to a halt in a large square. One of the guards up front turned towards them. End of the road, folks. Time to disembark. Give the city guards your entry tokens as you head out, and try not to spend everything you have on the first night, he laughed. You can find cheaper places to stay closer to the walls. We hope you had a pleasant trip. Pointing at the badge sewn onto his shirt, he added, Come back here any day at midday to book another journey with one of us. They were walking slowly down the street, staying close together. Wow, that was incredible, Aidan smacked his lips. I thought I'd had any kind of meat imaginable, but I've never had anything like that. And those fruit slices they gave us, what did they call it? Avocado? So good. You can say that again, Nael nodded. I never knew there were places like this. What did they say it was called? A restaurant, Garrett answered. Lavatown doesn't have any because it's too small, but all of the larger trading cities in the mainland have them. Being the biggest by far, Carantha City has a fair number. Well, I like it. Ordering off a menu? How cool was that? Garrett smiled. Yeah, it was pretty neat, wasn't it? At those prices, it better be, Lolmec said quietly. If all the food here is like that, I'm nervous to find out what it would cost to get a room anywhere. We could easily run out of money in a fortnight. He shook his head. I never would have imagined how anyone could even spend an entire gold in a year before, but that menu had a bottle of wine that cost that much. They turned into another street, heading in the general direction of the city walls. Oi there! Where are you from? From their left, two well-appointed, dark-skinned dwarves were approaching them with smiles on their faces. They headed towards Lormic, who stood still, his eyes downcast. I'm Brontor of High Hill, and this is Grinta of Smallstream, the dwarf smiled, extending his hand in greeting. And you are? Lormic looked confused. He extended his hand back carefully and said, I'm Lormic of Lavatown. Lavatown? What a strange name, Brontor looked at Grinta. Have you heard of it? She shook her head, and he turned back towards Lormic. Where is it? Must be in the south, next to one of the volcanoes? I thought it was mostly gnomes down there. Lormic's look of confusion deepened, and he looked helplessly at the others. Aiden spoke up. No, Lavatown, as in the Lavatown Peninsula, past Stormbridge? Stormbridge. I'm not sure. Oh, wait, you mean the port city up north, the place where the ships fly? Brontor exclaimed. Aiden nodded. I'll be damned, I didn't even know they had clans up there, Brontor said. Grinta, do you know they had a clan up there? No, she said, I didn't think so either. Isn't it all inside a mountain or something? She looked at Lormic. But you can't possibly be from around here. You have to be from the Sentia. She smiled reassuringly at Lormic. So where are you from originally? Looking increasingly uncomfortable, Lormic shook his head. Lavatown, like I said. Where is the Sentia? The two dwarves looked at him in astonishment, then started laughing loudly. Brontor clapped his hands and said, Good one. You must be a tall clanner. I gotta hear more. He turned to examine the group. Tell you what, folks, looks like you're in a bit of a rough patch. So why don't you come on over? Drinks will be our treat. He turned around and started walking briskly towards what looked like a 3-story inn across the street. Grinta smiled broadly and gestured for them to follow. Shrugging their shoulders, the little group went into the inn. Nice ale they serve here, Aiden said as he wiped his mouth. He tried to relax into his sit cushion. The softness of it made him uneasy. He looked around again, his senses overwhelmed by the coldness of wood that was cut in such a uniform manner. Nice place, he repeated, as if reassuring himself. It's all right, Brontor replied. Not fancy, but we like staying here. So who are you again? Brontor smiled. We're here on a trade mission. Spent a month in Robban, then we came up here. Our clans are finally starting to trust the promise. The what? The promise from Emeka? You know, the Emeka promise? Who? Brontor turned to Grinta and raised his palms helplessly. She said, enunciating carefully and slowly as if speaking to a child. King Emeka of Koranta, like the ruler of the continent? I'm sorry, I really don't know, Aiden said as he felt himself blushing. Where did you say you're from again? Grinta asked. Okay. Koranta City is the seat of the king. You know that at least? Aiden nodded slightly. For some reason, several decades ago, when the old king retired, they decided to put a dwarf on the throne. Well, it's really just a seat at the head of a long table, but anyway, never happened before. Shocked everyone to the core, but I will say it seems like it has been working out well for everyone. One of the things she did was make a formal promise to strengthen relationships with the Sentias through trade and security. It's something every king says, pretty much, but she proclaimed it as law and has actually been trying to do it for real. Helps that she has our lifespan. Anyway, her name is Emeka, and she's a Descentian like us, she concluded. How do you know she's Descentian? Her skin color, silly, Grinta laughed. All dark skins come from Descentia. He's Descentian too, she pointed at Lormic. Huh? Lormic looked at her in surprise. No way, I'm from Lavatown, like I told you. You think you were born in Koranta? It was Grinta's turn to sound surprised. Where else would I be from? That's ridiculous. Did you see the people on the street? And just look around you, she spread her hands at the other patrons. The locals are all fair-skinned. All the dark skins come from Descentia. We're the descendants of the sun, right? Descentia? Lormic stayed silent. Look, who are your parents? Grinta asked. Well, my dad runs a church back home, and my mom's dead. Well, you have a church of Thor in Lavatown? Grinta exclaimed, staring at the holy symbol on his chest. No, it's a church of Freyg. Lormic twitched uncomfortably. I just ended up this way. Well, that wouldn't shock me at all. At that, she smiled and pulled out from her pocket a small symbol of Thor on a silver chain. He's pretty popular back home, right, Brontor? Brontor nodded. But finding a sentient family out here, that's really unusual. Lomek took a deep breath. Well, my dad, he's human. Grinta raised her eyebrow. He adopted me when I was a kid. And your mom? Lomek paused, I never had a mother. Well, that's downright silly. Of course you had a mother, and your parents were the sentient. Did your father ever tell you where he got you from? We never really talked about it, no. Lomek sounded increasingly miserable. Well, do you remember anything from your childhood, before you were adopted? Any places? Even a fragment of memory will help. We can probably figure it out. Well, no, I don't. I don't remember anything at all. Lomek's eyes were rooted to the tabletop, and he was trembling. Huh. Well, looking at you, I'd say you were from the north. Grinta turned to Bronter. What do you think? Gotta be, Bronter responded. He raised his arms and added, lowlanders like us are fairer, and your build is stockier. Thing is, the inland northern clans don't get out much. Emeka has been trying to pull them into the trade network for a while now. It's a big part of the promise. I wonder how you ended up out here. Lomek said nothing. Well, that's fun. I wonder what else we're going to find out. Garrett stood up on his chair and started waving his empty glass. Hello there, can I have a refill, please? Please, he shouted. Well, that sure was a stroke of luck, wasn't it? Nael took off her boots. Oh, that feels good, she sighed in satisfaction as she wriggled her toes. You can say that again. Seems like we have a lot to learn, Aidan said as he sat down wearily on a cot next to the wall of the small room. 3 weeks for an interview to make a petition for an audience with a scribe? We never could have waited that long. Not without finding a source of income anyway, Lomek said. And this is a cheap place. Yes, Solly said, but I think between me and Garrett, we could have figured it out. She smiled slightly at the gnome who beamed up at her, then added, there are so many kinds of business conversations going on here all at once. Yeah, and I'm sure I could scare up a hatful of silver downstairs if I had to, Nael had laid down on one of the two beds. Still, sounds like it would have taken a long time for us to make any progress, so thank the gods for those two agreeing to help introduce us. She turned around on her elbow and looked at Lomek, who was standing looking outside the window. You okay, buddy? We're relying on you tomorrow. Lomek turned around to look at her. Yeah, I'll be all right. Just a bit of a shock to the system. You understand, he said. Sure I do, but it does explain a lot, doesn't it? It makes a lot of sense, yes. Thing is, I never admitted this to anyone in my entire life before. Lomek took a deep breath. I really don't remember anything before my father took me in. I wasn't just being cautious. Nothing? Nothing at all. Not a single moment, not even fuzzy. Just a complete and total blank. Lomek moved over and sat down at the edge of the bed. So, if they're right and I came from the Sentia, then who are my parents? Which clan did I come from? And why did they desert me? They said the northern clans are insular and very loyal. So why would they leave me like that? How bad must I have been as a child? I never felt as worthless as I do right now, he ended, his voice breaking. Nael reached out a hand and touched Lomek's back. Don't say that, Lomek. I'm sure there was a good reason, and it wasn't because you're worthless. You certainly matter to us, right, guys? They murmured their assent, except for Solis, who stayed silent as she considered the question. Then, as everybody started moving about in preparation for sleep, she nodded slightly, but nobody seemed to notice.
Poor Lomek.
I know. You did a good job making me feel sorry for him. Yeah.
Do what?
You did a good job making me feel sorry for him. And also they're rallying around him more, they're getting diapers. Was the picture of the woman a photograph?
Sounds like it.
I was gonna
Sounds
say,
like
I was thinking the same thing, although I don't know that I would have picked up on it if we hadn't just got done with the
This
nuts and
recent.
bolts.
All right, so we have nuts and bolts. We have what looks like a printed page. We have something that looks like a photograph. We have the term Pope appear all of a sudden, right? So I don't know. Clues, right?
Now you're
Clearly part of the mystery.
now you're in living color.
But wait, that only Lomek was saying, I've never seen anything like this in the picture, and the other ones weren't saying the same.
They weren't seeing it. Just only Lomek and Garrett.
Oh.
Lomek only shared it with Garrett, not with the rest of the group. They were at the campfire. Everybody else was already sleeping. And he was kind of looking at it, right? And Garrett was like, oh, what are you looking at? Right? Kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And so the rest of the group doesn't even remember that he picked it up, right? Even Garrett didn't remember because there was so much excitement going on. They were trying to save their lives, right? So the whole point is that it's still a secret. It's just that there's now one more person in on the secret.
I don't know if it needs more help in being identified as a photograph, but like the one thing I was thinking, like when you were talking about it, was like, I want, like, is it shiny? Is it like
It doesn't need any more.
Okay.
This is fine.
No, it was obvious to me that it was a photograph.
It should be
Person
clear to
never
us because
seen.
we have the context of the modern world, but what matters here is that they don't, right? So for them,
The way you described them seeing one for the first time, it took, like, they were talking about it, and then it was like, oh, this is someone who's never seen a photograph.
Right.
Talking about a photograph.
trying to very like think about it and analyze it, right? They're being very like,
Yeah.
they're trying their best in the context of their lives to figure out what this thing looks like, what this thing
Yeah.
means, right?
And-
And they came up with these terms for nuts and bolts, which is driver and tightener. By the way, the name of the next chapter is nut and bolts.
Huh, well, you got a couple of, more than a couple of these little things that I just don't remember coming across in other stuff that I read like that.
Cool.
And you're doing it well.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna say, is this like a, no, you're not gonna answer me if I ask a question, but I'm thinking. The post-apocalyptic world 500 years.
It's possible. Who knows? Everything is possible.
Cause there are artifacts, right?
So I've now heard, I think, 3 competing theories. Anybody wants to come up with more? I think we have the competing of you just came up with one where it says there's like parallel universes that
No,
lead into each
just
other.
Physically separated, I mean, well. Kind of on the cusp between the two.
Right, and you have that one. I think somebody brought up the time travel theory. It was Greg, I think you brought
Yeah.
up the time travel
Right,
theory.
it was me, if not, it was them.
I'm loving this, right? Because it's awesome. It's like none of you are right, but it's all awesome.
And
But I love it. I love the theories. It means that
Really-
it's like you're thinking about it, right?
I thought the one that was.
And the whole point. I mean, for me, so talk about mysteries that I like. I like mysteries that have involved stuff that's hidden in plain sight. And this book is full of Easter eggs. There's 2 promises I make for you, and I've repeated them before. I'm going to repeat them again, even for this purpose of this video. The first promise: I'm not going to waste your time. So if I'm telling you something you need to know about, I'm not going to tell you something you don't need to know. When you remember you asked me about the mud pits, you wanted to hear more about the fight in the mud pits. You don't need to know about the fight in the mud pits. You just need to know that it happened. Similarly, every other part of the book, not wasting your time. Every word has a meaning. There's a reason that the word is there. That's why I'm saying there are dozens and dozens of the Easter eggs. They're kind of flowing in the language, and you're probably missing most of them. But they're all there all the time.
Sure.
The second thing is, so I'm not wasting your time. And the other thing is that nothing you're hearing is as straightforward as it comes across.
Anyway, I'm glad we did 3.
Yeah.
I would vote for that kind of thing. And I'm glad I came
Yeah.
instead of seeing it on video, because it's so much. Better.
Did you like the description of the world, by the way? We just did another zoom out, right?
Yeah.
You get
I was
like-
wondering how you were gonna do the zoom out. It was subtle, like it.
So you're getting a sense of the city now, and of the splendor of this, a little bit about the world and what's happening. Right?
So the 2 dwarfs came over to introduce themselves because they saw another dwarf.
They saw another,
That was
and
it.
that's kind of like, oh, what are you doing here, right? And apparently there's another continent full of these people, right? And
That
that
they
kind
don't know about very much.
they don't know shit. They're like rubes, right? Completely different world, even though it's only 50 miles away, right?
Or it's start really in the back and then run over.
Someone got it.
Just say whatever you want to say.
Who remembers?
All right, thank you for joining us today for this reading of 5. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please click that like button. And if you want to join us next time, please subscribe to the channel. Until then, bye-bye.